Hello, welcome to Oxford Heirlooms. Well, if you've made it this far to video number 3 of Project 30, hopefully you have your homework finished. Hopefully you have completed row number 2, which is the outlet or stem stitch. Hopefully you have finished on the back your 2 rows of back smocking on row 1 and row 16. And then in between rows 9 and 10, you have finished your pink and green full space chevron crossover. Okay, so we're going to continue today. Now today, we're going to move up on the sampler and we're going to work on this row that's solid blue up here right underneath the stem stitch. Now this is the same stitch we were doing down here. It's a chevron, but instead of stepping all the way from row 9 to row 10, we're going to step halfway down. So let's get our teaching sampler out for just a minute. Okay, now what we're going to have to do on the teaching sampler, you'll notice that we're going to start in between row 3 and row 4. So what we need to do is we need to pretend, let me draw a line here, that we have a pleating thread. Do that in red so you can see it. We're going to pretend that there's a thread in between row 3 and 4. That's going to be important. Okay, so we're going to use the blue floss today, and working from the price tag end, let me find my loose end, and I'm going to pull out 3 loops. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and that'll get me enough to get me started. Okay, now I'm going to split this into 3 and 3 strands again. And like I said, the way I do this is I get it started, and then I put my finger in between and I just gently untwist it. This one seems like it's a little more twisted than some of the others are, but that's okay. It'll untwist. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to put one of the pieces up above here, and then I will thread my needle with the other piece. Let me find the end. And once again, I'm going to tie a little overhand knot at the end of the thread. You don't need a lot of thread hanging out underneath the knot, so try to do your knot fairly close to the end of the thread. Just a little bit hanging out will be fine. Okay, now with my blue magic marker, let's go ahead and draw what we're going to be doing right now. Okay, I'm going to highlight rows 3 and 4 in blue because we're doing 2 rows of chevron. Now what we'll do is we will start with a down cable at level 3.5, step up to row 3 and do an up cable, go back down to 3.5 and do a down cable, back up to 3 and do another up cable, back down to 3.5 and do a down cable. So we will be pretending that there's a halfway line in between. Now we're going to come back and do another row underneath this. So when you go down to the halfway mark, we're going to go just not quite all the way half down. Because if you go all the way down, if you go all the way to the halfway mark, it doesn't really leave enough room for the two rows to be evenly spaced. So we're going to work on that. Okay, so we have to count to row 3.5. 1, 2, 3, and then 3.5. So I'm going to come up from the back in that very first cable. Now notice where I'm coming up at. Okay, I'm not quite halfway. I'm just about like a needle's, you can kind of measure, you want to like leave like a needle's width between the 1/2 mark and where you start. Okay, and then we'll do a down cable. And then we'll step up to row 3 in the very next cable. Remember, we always go to the next cable over. You know, you very seldom do you smock in the same cable twice. And we don't skip pleats either. I do an up cable on row 3. Oops, I got a knot in my thread. Hold on a second, let me get that undone. There we go. And then back down to not quite 1/2. You just have to kind of eyeball that, and you'll get better at it. Okay, and then do a down cable on row 3.5, where there's not a pleating thread, but we'll just pretend that there is one. And so, see, we're doing the same stitch that we were doing before, only we're just changing it up slightly. Okay, now once again, let's check the progress of our work. Okay, now like before, we were leaving 2 empty pleats in between the cables up and down. So I've got 2 empty pleats down here, and I've got 2 empty pleats up here on row 3. Let's step back down to not quite 3.5, but close to it. And do a down cable. Hopefully your tension is getting a little bit better now, where you just want to pull the floss tight to where the pleats are snug up next to one another, but without puckering. Once again, at any time you can stop and check your progress. Make sure that between these upper and lower cables, you have 2 empty pleats. Now we're not going to come back and fill them in this time, because what we're going to do is we're going to do a mirror image row underneath this. Okay, so let me keep going for a little while and I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm about halfway across, okay? So I'm going to take my thread, my floss off my needle temporarily, and I'm gonna wrap it around my fingers and tape it off to the side over here with a piece of painter's tape, and we will finish that row a little bit later, okay? Now let's kind of inspect our row. It's easy to keep the cables on top of the chevrons in a straight row because we're following a smocking thread. But that bottom row needs to be nice and even, not moving up and down as you go along. Now let's look at the smocking sampler for just a minute. Now if you'll notice on this blue row, we have started with the top of the diamonds. You can see there's a diamond shape in there. So we're going to come back and fill in with the bottom part of the diamond underneath it. And this will be a mirror image underneath of what we have below. So what is above is going to be what will be below. So let's pick up our other piece of blue floss and thread our needle. Tie a little overhand knot at the end of the thread of the floss. Just something where you've got just a little bit hanging out. Let me see if I can. I think I didn't get that knot in there real well, so let me try that again. Okay, there we go. So you just want a little bit of thread hanging off. If you've made it too long, you can always trim that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start at row 3.5 again, just right underneath where we started before. Can you see where I'm coming up? Okay, now we started with a down cable, and this time we're going to start with an up cable. Just put your needle in right next to the bottom of that cable that's up above it and do an up cable. And then we're going to step down to row 4 and do a down cable. Finish up our little down cable down here. And then step back up to row 3.5, just right below, maybe about a needle's width away from where we stopped, where we did the cable before, up above, and just begin to fill in with mirror image chevrons down below. Do a down cable here. And step back up and do an up cable. And you can see the diamonds start to close up. And once again, if you're doing this correctly, we've got 2 empty pleats in between each of the 2 lower cables. Now, those of y'all who have already sent me an email for the smocking template, you'll notice I sent a picture of the completed sampler piece also. So you can always zoom in and look and see what do these stitches look like. And so as I'm looking at the stitches, what I'm completing on the sampler does look like what's on the completed sampler. Okay, so let me do a few more of these and then I will tape it off to the side and we'll begin another row. Okay, so I've got several of these done now. Um, and I'm going to take my floss off of the needle and I'm going to wrap it around my fingers and I'm going to tape it kind of over here out of the way. And we will complete this row a little bit later. But we're going to go ahead and start on the next row. Now, if you want to go ahead and finish your rows, that's perfectly fine. Now, the row that we just did on the smocking sampler, on the teaching sampler, is we did an up cable, chevron down, down cable, chevron, cable, chevron, cable, chevron, cable, chevron, cable. And we're filling in down below exactly what we had up above. Okay, now the next row that we're going to do, we're going to use blue again. Now this row that's blue right up above our chevron crossovers is the same stitch again, only we're going to change it. Instead of having one cable, we're going to do 3 cables. So we're going to start on row 7.5. So we're going to be doing rows 7 and 8, 2 rows of half space chevron cable. Okay, so we're going to start by doing 3 little cables halfway, then chevron up to row 7. We're going to do the top half of the row first, and then chevron down to row 7.5 and do 3 more cables. Chevron up to row 7 and do 3 cables, and just begin to fill in the pattern up along the top. Okay, so we're going to need to load our needle out with blue floss again. And we've just used both pieces of our blue floss, so we'll have to pull 3 more loops out in order to, that's 1 loop, that's 2 loops, and that's 3 loops. And then we'll have to split this floss into 3 and 3. Once again, just very carefully lay it out on the table next to you and use your finger and allow it to untwist. Okay, all right, so I've got 2 pieces. I'm gonna set 1 piece aside up here with the rest of the floss because we'll use that in a little bit. And then I'm gonna load my needle up with some blue floss. Okay, now once again, we're gonna have to count down to row 7.5. And we'll start with a down cable, an up cable, and then a down cable. Then we'll chevron up to row 7 and do an down cable, an up cable, a down cable, and an up cable. Okay, so I've tied my little overhand knot in my thread. So let's count down to row 7.5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is row 7. We're going to come up not quite halfway. Once again, we're going to pretend there's a thread halfway down. And this is important in smocking for you to be able to see that halfway point. Once again, we're going to pretend that there's a thread halfway through. Okay, so you see where I'm coming up? I'm coming up about halfway. Let me get a little bit farther down. I'm coming up about halfway through on row 7.5. Okay, so we need to start with a down cable. So have the floss hanging down and do a down cable. An up cable. And another down cable. Okay, so that's the change that we're making from the stitch that we just did. We're going to have, between each chevron, instead of having one cable, we're going to have 3 cables. Okay, now we're going to step up. And up above, we're going to have an up cable, a down cable, and another up cable. Okay, and then we're going to step down, not quite to row 7.5, but close to it. Step down with the chevron, and then we're going to do a down cable, an up cable, and a down cable. And then step up to row 7. Do an up cable, a down cable, and another up cable. So let me continue to do this for a few more minutes. This pattern is a little bit more complicated, but the only change we're making is instead of doing 1 cable in between chevrons, we're doing 3 cables. Okay, can you see what I'm doing here? Okay, so we're alternating from row 7 down to close to 7.5. Okay, so let me continue to do some more stitches. Okay, I've got that about halfway across now, and as I'm checking, you just need to make sure that you have 3 cables in between each one of the little chevron, either step up or step down. And once again, the top of this design, it's easy to keep it in line because we're following the pleating thread, but the bottom of the design needs to be in a straight line also. And, you know, learning how to eyeball that halfway position between 2 pleating threads is very important. So that's why we're doing that stitch. Okay, so I'm going to take my needle off of my floss temporarily, wrap it around my fingers, and then I'm going to tape it into place over here off to the side. painter's tape. Now notice I'm taping this down below because we're gonna start working in here next. Well, not next, no, after we finish what we're doing. Okay, so now with the blue marker, okay, we need to do the mirror image of what we just did above. So we're gonna start with 3 cables, step down to row 8, 3 cables, step up to row 7.5, 3 cables, step down to row 8, 3 cables up to 7.5. So we're going, what is above is what is going to be below, a mirror image. Okay, so we got another piece of blue floss over here, and we need to load up our needle again. Tie a little overhand knot at the end of the thread. Okay. Okay, now we're gonna come back in at row 7.5 again, just right below where we started before. And we started with a down cable, so this time we're gonna start with an up cable. So we're gonna do an up, a down, and an up. So do 3 cables. Can you see what I've done here? And then we're gonna step down to row 8. And we'll have a down cable, an up cable, and another down cable. So what's basically happening is on the outer edges of our design, we've got two cables on the outer edge and 1 in the middle. And we're just going to start filling in. With a mirror image of what is up above it. There's a lot of mirror imaging done in smocking. So that's a good skill, or it's an important skill that you really need to try to master. Okay, so let me keep doing this for a little while. Okay, so I have 5 of the pattern repeats completed right now. So I'm going to take my needle off of my floss, and once again, I'm gonna wrap it around my fingers, and I'm gonna tape it out of the way down here. And that will be obviously some homework to do a little bit later on for me to do. Okay, now then, the next row that we're gonna do something a little prettier this time. Okay, we're gonna go back to using some green and pink. Okay, you see this up and down Okay, now we have been, when we did the crossovers, we did full step. We stepped from one thread down to the other pleating thread. When we did these stitches, we did half steps. When we do this stitch, we're gonna do quarter steps. So it's important to be able to figure out and to be able to eyeball a quarter of the way down. But notice what's happening here. First, we're gonna do quarter steps all the way between rows 5 and 6. Then go back up to row 5 and then halfway down, back up, all the way down, halfway down, all the way down, halfway down, all the way down, halfway down. And then when we get finished that, we're gonna come back through and put these little pink flowerettes in here. So let's get some green, get our green marker, and let's look at our smocking sampler. So I'm gonna highlight row 5, full space trellis and half space trellis. Okay, these ones where we went halfway and all the way were called chevrons. This stitch where we go only a quarter of the way is called a chevron. So we're gonna start by doing an up cable, then we're gonna quarter step down to row number 6 and do a cable, quarter step back up to row 5, do a cable, quarter step halfway down between 5 and 6 and do a cable, and we're gonna just alternate all the way down, halfway down, all the way down, halfway down, all the way down, halfway down. Now, don't be surprised when you're doing this if you get so excited doing these quarter steps that you do 2 all the way downs next to each other, but you can always take the thread out if you need to. Okay, so I'm gonna get my green floss, and from my price tag side, I'm gonna pull out 3 loops, 1, 2, 3. Clip that off. I don't have any green floss sitting over here. Then I'm gonna split it into 3 and 3. Just very gently and carefully unravel it. And put one of them off to the side. Okay, so I'll put one of them up here and we'll use that piece a little bit later. Okay, now let me load my needle up. Tie a little overhand knot in here. Okay, all right, now we're gonna be starting on row 5 with an up cable. So I'm gonna count down to row number 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm gonna start on the level of row 5, but right above that pleating thread. And we're gonna start by doing an up cable. Okay, now this is where you have to eyeball. You know, a quarter, 1/2, 3/4, one all the way down. So just start to eyeball at a quarter step, a half step, 3/4, and all the way down. And then when you get all the way down, do a down cable. And then start quarter stepping back up. 1/4, halfway, 3/4, and all the way up. And when you get all the way up, do an up cable. Okay, now on this next one, we're only going to go halfway down, because that's what the design is telling us to do. So we're going to go 1/4 of the way, halfway, and then do a cable. Do a down cable. And then go back up 1/4 of a way, all the way back up to row 5. And then do a cable. To top it off. Okay, can you see what I'm doing in here? Okay, so we will continue this. Now the next one is going to be all the way down. So we're going to go to 1/4 of a way, halfway, 3/4 of the way, and then all the way. And do a cable to finish it off. And then start stepping back 1/4 of the way, halfway, 3/4 of the way, and all the way. And we can look back at our design. We've got all the way, halfway, all the way. So this next one's going to be halfway. Let's do a cable up here to cap it off. Then go halfway, do 1/4 of a way, halfway, do a cable, and then step back up 1/4 steps. Okay, so we're alternating all the way, halfway, all the way, halfway. This next one needs to be all the way. So let me continue to make these steps. Okay, so I have several repeats of the pattern going along here, and I've been careful to do all the way, halfway, 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 all the way. So just keep in mind that I know when I've done smocking lessons with people before, sometimes people just get carried away and they start doing the all the way down ones each time, but we are alternating all the way, halfway. So I'm going to take my needle off of my floss and I'm going to wrap it around my finger real quickly. And I'm going to set it off here to the side. Tape that into place. Okay, now if you notice, we've got little pink flowerettes inside each of the ones that go all the way down, each of the trellises that go all the way down. What we're going to have to do is, this is called a 6-petal flowerette, because let me see if I can zoom in here. It's got 6 little stitches, 3 cables going one way, and then 3 cables underneath it going the other way. Okay, and those 6 cables, they cover 4 different pleats. Okay, so what we're going to do, let me find my pink marker. You can see here, we're going to start on row 5. We're going to do a down cable, an up cable, and a down cable. And then we're going to do a little trick where we turn it upside down and come back the other way and do a down cable, an up cable, and a down cable. We'll do that on each one where we have the trellis going all the way between row 5 and 6. And this is called a 6-petal flowerette. And the flowers in English smocking is really what sets the smocking off and makes it really, really pretty. Okay, so let me set my sampler aside, bring my canvas over here again. And I've got a piece of pink floss from when I was doing another stitch that I hadn't used yet. So I'm going to load this into my needle. Tie a little overhand knot. Okay, so here's where it gets a little bit complicated. I'm going to pull those pleats apart. Now you see this, these 2 center pleats are where the bottom cable is. So I'm going to go over to the second pleat. I want to use the 4 center pleats. And I'm going to come in on row 5. You see where I'm coming in at? Okay, I'm going to start by doing a down cable on row 5. Go to the next pleat over and do a down cable, an up cable, and this time instead of doing a complete down cable, what I'm going to do is I'm going to spread that pleat apart, and on the right side of the pleat, I'm going to go into the back. Now that gives me 3 petals of my little flowerette. Now I'm going to turn the smocking upside down because we got to go back the other way now. And we're going to come in on the same pleat that we just went out on, but right above it. Can you see where I'm coming in at? Okay, and we need to do another set of down, up, down cables. So start with a down cable. Do an up cable. And then just like we were finishing a row, we're going to pull that pleat open and go in on the left side or the right side of the pleat, go into the back again. And that finishes up the 6 little petals of the little flowerette. And then we'll tie that off. Let's do that one more time. Clip the thread. Okay, let me tie a little overhand knot. So now we have one little flowerette inside there. Okay, so once again, you've got to learn, I mean, it just takes practice to get these centered in here. So select your 4 center pleats, find your middle pleat and go over 2 pleats. Start on row 5. And do a down cable, an up cable, and then we're going to go into the back to finish this off, right above the pleating thread. Then I'm going to turn my work over so I can go back the other direction. Come back in on the pleat we just came out of. And do another down, up, down. And when you do the third cable, we're going to go into the back, pull that pleat apart a little bit, into the back, and we'll tie off the flowerette. And see where I've got going in here. Okay, so this completes lesson number 2 for today, and we have a little bit of homework to do before we come back and do lesson number 3. Okay, so you will need to finish rows 3 and 4, the 2 rows of chevrons, half space chevrons. You'll need to complete in between rows 7 and 8 the half space chevron cables. You'll need to complete your green trellis halfway and all the way across, and then complete your little pink flowerettes. Okay, so I'll see you next time. Thank you.